The latest statistics from Eurostat agency estimates Ireland's annual inflation hit 9.6% in June. This is the highest rate of inflation since 1983. Ireland's real economy is in a very dire place today. The government are good at cherry-picking certain economic variables and spinning those to make matters look better. But the sad reality is that this country is now more unequal than at any point in our history. A recent nationwide Irish Mirror survey of 2,300 people highlights that 64% of Irish people feel they are living in relative poverty. 8 out of 10 Irish people are struggling to pay their bills. More than half are under pressure with their mortgage repayments. 64% eating less healthier to save money. 58% spend less money on their children. 88% are staying at home, stopping social activities. And 39% have asked family and friends for financial help. The findings of this survey tally with what the people in my constituency of Cork South West are telling me. The cruel and heartless decision by your government not to introduce an emergency budget illustrates that you are out of touch and care little about the struggles of these people. Instead, the government is behaving like a British landlord in Ireland during famine times, looking the other way. It is shameful and despicable treatment of the Irish people. The current cost of living crisis is financially crippling to all lower income earners, including pensioners, struggling mortgage holders and unemployed. It is also having a disproportionate impact on all rural residents. Farmers facing a 300% increase in the cost of fertiliser, combined with the huge impacts of fuel and feed costs, and fishermen fuel costs leading them to staying tied up at the piers across the country. The skimpy package of measures to date announced by the government is grossly insufficient and feels like a wet sticky plaster on a wound, given the depth and impact of this crisis. That is why a robust emergency budget is now long overdue, which we, the Rural Independent Group, tabled a motion for back in February, which he blocked. The government has been idle, allowing costs to soar while simultaneously benefiting from record VAT excise duties and carbon taxes, from fuel, home heating, electricity, household goods, building materials, fertiliser and animal feeds. The only meaningful way to tackle current inflation and protect consumers is through taxation reliefs. Unfortunately, swift government actions on this or any public crisis are rare or reserved solely for the large corporate vested interests such as banks that were bailed out by Fianna Fáil and the Greens. However, standing by and paying lip service to this emergency is no longer a tenable position to hold. Suggesting that measures will be introduced in a budget brought 2 weeks ahead in autumn will be too late and pushes the response out into 2023 for many. Taoiseach, we need action now from Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. Will you immediately introduce an emergency budget? Will you immediately drop the carbon tax on fuel, which will help struggling families? Or will you sit on your hands brazenly, leaving the Irish people lose their homes, their farms, their fishing boats, their businesses, their lorries and their livelihoods?
Thanks, Deputy. I'm not interested in cherry-picking data or statistics. I'm somebody who's a medical doctor by training. I take science seriously. I take data seriously, and I always like to know the numbers and see the numbers. And that's when I look for the data. I look for the data from reputable independent bodies, like, for example, the Central Statistics Office or the Central Bank, that act independently and produce robust data that we can stand by. I tend to be a little bit more sceptical when it comes to surveys that are done by lobbyist groups or interest groups or NGOs, because very often that data is non-scientific. But if we do look at the facts are that employment levels are at the highest they've ever been, 2.5 million in the state. We know that median incomes are rising, notwithstanding the impact of inflation. And that would not be, we would not see the income tax receipts being as strong as they are if that were not the case. More people at work in the country than ever before, employment growth in every region of the state. The highest employment growth last year in your own region of the South West, followed closely by the South East. The CSO does data on income distribution. It's contained in a document called the Survey on Income and Living Conditions, which is published once a year. It's the only robust scientific data on income inequality, and they measure something called the Gini coefficient. And in Ireland, we have seen income inequality reduce in the last 5 to 10 years, trending downwards, unlike in most developed countries. And we see the number of people experiencing consistent poverty and at risk of poverty and deprivation can go up and down year by year, but trending downwards significantly over the past 5 or 6 years. Those are the facts. And people are absolutely entitled to their opinions and their ideologies. but people aren't entitled to their facts, and those are the facts that are there for anyone to see who's interested in them. But there are real risks, and I acknowledge that, particularly with inflation being so high, 9 or 10%, the highest we've seen in 40 years. People are really feeling the pinch. And there's a real risk this year that for the first time in a long time, we will go backwards, with real incomes falling, with increasing poverty levels and possibly increasing inequality. And that's something that I don't want to happen. That's something that government doesn't want to happen. And that's why we're doing what we're doing. The measures we've introduced already, which I outlined already in the Dáil, measures that will take effect over the summer in relation to back to school and back to college, measures that will take place after Budget Day in September, immediately putting money in people's pockets, and more that will kick in January. This is a dynamic response to a cost of living crisis, which unfortunately is going to continue for some time.